Mrs. Wread back to share another chapter of Charlotte's Web by E.B. White. Today we're going to be reading chapter 10. And if you remember from chapter 9, Charlotte had just kind of tucked and calmed Wilbur down, tucked him in for the night, so that she could start working on her plan of how to save him. So, as usual, find your comfy place, sit back and relax, and get ready to be a listener. Chapter 10, An Explosion. Day after day, the spider waited, head down, for an idea to come to her. Hour by hour, she sat motionless, deep in thought. Having promised Wilbur that she would devise a plan, she was determined. Charlotte was naturally patient, as spiders are. She knew from experience that if she waited long enough, a fly would come to her web. So she felt sure that if she thought long enough about Wilbur's problem, that an idea would come to mind. Finally, one morning, towards the middle of July, an idea came. "Why, how perfectly simple," she said to herself. "The way to save Wilbur's life is to play a trick on Zuckerman." If I can fool a bug, thought Charlotte, I can surely fool a man. People are not as smart as bugs. Wilbur walked into his yard just at that moment. "What are you thinking about, Charlotte?" he asked. "Oh, I was just thinking," said the spider, "that people, meaning humans, are really gullible." "What does gullible mean?" Wilbur asked. "Oh, that means they're easy to fool." "That's a mercy," replied Wilbur. He lay down in the shade of the fence, and he went fast to sleep. It seems like he's feeling pretty confident in his friend Charlotte. The spider, however, stayed awake, wide awake, gazing affectionately at Wilbur, and trying to make plans for his future. Summer was half gone, and she knew that she didn't have much time. That morning, just as Wilbur fell asleep, Avery Arabelle wandered into the Zuckerman's front yard, followed by Fern. Avery carried a live frog in his hand. Fern had a crown of daisies in her hair, and the children ran for the kitchen. "Just in time for a piece of blueberry pie," said Mrs. Zuckerman. "Look at my frog," said Avery, placing the frog on the drain board, which is like the side of the sink, and holding out his hand for a piece of pie. "Get that thing out of here," Mrs. Zuckerman said. "He's hot," said Fern. "He's almost dead, that frog." "He is not," said Avery. "He lets me scratch him between the eyes." The frog jumped and landed in Mrs. Zuckerman's dishpan full of soapy water. That can't be healthy for a frog. "You're getting your pie on you," said Fern. "Can I look for eggs in the hen house, Aunt Edith?" "Go run outdoors, both of you, and don't bother the hens." "Come on, frog," said Avery. He scooped up his frog, and the frog kicked, splashing soapy water all over a blueberry pie. "Another crisis," groaned Fern. "Let's swing on the swing," said Avery. The children ran to the barn. Mr. Zuckerman had the best swing in the county. It was a single long piece of heavy rope that was tied to the barn in the north doorway. And at the bottom end of the rope, there was a big fat knot that you could sit on. And it was arranged so that you could swing without being pushed. You climb a ladder into the hayloft, and then holding the rope, you stood at the edge and you looked down and you were scared and a little bit dizzy. Then you straddled the knot so that it acted like a seat. Then you got then you got all of your nerve and took a deep breath and you jumped. Okay, so I'm trying to picture this, and I'm personally feeling a little bit nervous. For a second, you seemed to be falling fast to the barn floor. But suddenly, the rope would begin to catch you, and you would sail through the barn door a mile long, or a mile a minute. And with the wind whistling in your eyes and your ears and your hair, you would zoom back upwards, and you would look up at the clouds, and the rope would twist, and you would drop down, down, down out of the sky and come sailing back into the barn, almost to the hayloft. Then you'd sail back out again, not quite as far this time, and then in again, not quite so high, then out again, then in again, then out again, and then you would jump off and fall down and let somebody else have a turn. Mothers for miles worried about the Zuckerman swing. They feared some child would fall off, but no child ever did. Children almost always hang on to things tighter than their parents think that they will. Avery put the frog in his pocket and he climbed into the hayloft. The last time I swang on this swing, I almost crashed into a barn swallow. If you remember, a swallow in this book is referred to as a bird. "Take that frog out," yelled Fern. So he still has the frog in his pocket while he's getting on a swing? I don't think so. Poor frog. Avery straddled the rope and he jumped. He sailed out through the door, the frog and all, into the sky, and then he sailed back into the barn. "Your tongue is purple," screamed Fern. "So is yours," cried Avery as he swung out again. "I have hay in my dress. It itches," cried Fern. "Scratch it," yelled Avery as he sailed back into the barn. "It's my turn," said Fern. "Jump off." "Fern's got the itch," sang Avery. When he jumped off, he threw the swing up to his sister. She shut her eyes and jumped. She shut her eyes tight and she jumped. She felt the dizzy drop and the supporting lift of the swing when she finally opened her eyes, looking up into the blue sky that was about to fly back through the door. Oh my goodness. As a mom, this kind of makes me really nervous. But when I was a kid, we grew up in a barn, or near a barn, that was attached to our house, and we totally did this. They took turns for hours. When the kids grew tired of swinging, they went down towards the pasture and they picked wild raspberries and they ate them. Their tongues turned from purple to red. Fern bit into a raspberry that had a bad tasting bug inside it, and she got a little discouraged. Avery found an empty candy box and he put his frog in it. The frog seemed tired after his morning in the swing. The children walked slowly up to the barn. They too were tired and had hardly any energy to walk. "Let's build a tree house," suggested Avery. "I want to live in a tree with my frog." "I'm going to go visit Wilbur," Fern announced. They climbed the fence into the lane and walked lazily toward the pig pen, and Wilbur heard them coming and he got up. Avery noticed the spider web, and coming closer, he saw Charlotte. This is Fern swinging on that awesome rope swing that they have at their uncle's barn. Notice how long that rope is. So she's swinging from inside the barn out the door. So Avery just noticed Charlotte. "Hey, look at that big spider," he said. "It's tremendous." "Leave it alone," commanded Fern. "You've got a frog, isn't that enough?" "Oh, that's a fine spider. I'm going to capture it," said Avery. He took over the candy box. He took the cover off the candy box. Then he picked up a stick. I'm going to knock that old spider into this box. Wilbur's heart almost stopped when he saw what was going on. This might be the end of Charlotte if that boy succeeded in catching her. Wilbur's heart... You stop it, Avery, cried Fern. Avery put one leg over the fence of the pig pen. He was just about to raise his stick to hit Charlotte when he lost his balance. He swayed and he toppled and he landed on the edge of Wilbur's trough. The trough tipped up and then came down with a slap. The goose egg was right underneath it. There was a dull explosion as the egg broke, and there was a horrible smell. Fern screamed. Avery jumped to his feet. The air was filled with terrible gases and smells from that rotten egg that Templeton had been resting under his nest. And Templeton scuttled away into the barn. "Good night," screamed Avery. "Good night. What a stink. Let's get out of here." Fern was crying. She held her nose and she ran towards the house. Avery ran after her, holding his nose. Charlotte felt greatly relieved to see him go. It had been a really narrow escape. Later on that morning, the animals came up from the pasture, the sheep, the lambs, the gander, the goose, and the 7 goslings. And there were many complaints about the awful smell. And Wilbur had to tell the story over and over again about how the Arabelle boy had tried to capture Charlotte. And how the smell of the broken egg drove him away just in time. "It was that rotten goose egg that saved Charlotte's life," said Wilbur. The goose was proud of her share in the adventure. This is Avery with his stick after he fell onto the trough trying to whack at Charlotte's web. I'm glad he did not succeed. I don't know about you. Although I hope he's not hurt. "I'm delighted that the egg never hatched," she gabbled. Templeton, of course, was miserable over the loss of his beloved egg, but he couldn't resist boasting. "It pays to save things," he said in his surly voice. "A rat never knows when something's going to come in handy and never throws it away." "Well," said one of the lambs, "this whole business is all well and good for Charlotte, but what about the rest of us? The smell is unbearable. Who wants to live in a barn that is perfumed with a rotten egg?" "Don't worry, you'll get used to it," said Templeton. He sat up and pulled wisely at his long whiskers, and then he crept away to pay a visit to the dump. When Lurvy showed up at lunchtime carrying a pail of food for Wilbur, he stopped short a few paces from the pig pen. He sniffed the air and he made a face. "What in thunder?" he said, setting down the pail, and he picked up the stick that Avery had dropped, and he pried up the trough. "Rats," he said. "Phew! I know a rat could make a nest under this trough. How I hate a rat." So poor Templeton's kind of getting the blame for the smell. And Lurvy dragged Wilbur's trough across the yard, kicked some dirt into the rat's nest, and buried the broken egg and all of Templeton's other possessions. Then he picked up the pail. Wilbur stood in the trough, drooling with hunger. Lurvy poured, and the slop ran creamily down around the pig's eyes and ears. Wilbur grunted, and he gulped and he gulped and he sucked and he sucked. And he gulped, making swishing and swooshing noises, anxious to get everything in his mouth at once. It was a delicious meal. Skim milk, wheat middlings, leftover pancakes, half of a donut, the rind of some summer squash, 2 pieces of stale toast, the third of a ginger snap, a fishtail, one orange peel, several noodles from a noodle soup, and the scum off of the cocoa, and some ancient jelly roll, and a strip of paper from the lining of the garbage pail, and 1 spoon of raspberry jello. Holy Christmas on a cracker. That's quite a diet that Wilbur is living on. But he is trying to get chubby, right? Wilbur ate heartily. He planned to leave half a noodle and a few drops of milk for Templeton. Then he remembered that the rat had been useful in saving Charlotte's life, and that Charlotte was trying to save his life, so he left a whole noodle instead of a half. Now that the broken egg was buried and the air cleared up and the barn smelled good again, the afternoon passed and evening came. Shadows lengthened, and the cool and kindly breath of the evening entered through the doors and the windows. Astride her web, Charlotte sat moodily, eating a horsefly, thinking about the future. After a while, she bestirred herself. She descended down into the center of the web, and there she began to cut some of her lines. She worked slowly but steadily, while the other creatures drowsed. None of the others, not even the goose, noticed that she was hard at work. And deep, soft, snug in his bed, Wilbur snoozed. Over in their favorite corner, the goslings whistled at night. Charlotte tore quite a section out of her web, leaving an open space in the middle of her web. Then she started weaving something to take the place of the threads that she had removed. When Templeton got back from the dump around midnight, the spider was still hard at work. And that, my friends, is the end of chapter 10. Tune in next time for chapter 11, The Miracle. See you next time.